We are talking about jazz licks, 3 tiers of jazz licks. We're going to start with the, hey, I've never done this before. I don't know anything about harmony, never really listened to jazz, but maybe I'm a little curious about how a 2-5-1 works, how we get from the dominant sound, the 5 sound, to the 1, to the tonic. We are going to start out incredibly simple with just one note, and ironically, all of us, professional, intermediate, or beginners, should pay way more attention to this first tier than perhaps we think we should. We'll get to that a little bit later. Then we'll get into a middle tier. Perhaps you've got a little bit of an ear for jazz, you're understanding a little bit about harmony, maybe a couple of tensions on a chord. We'll look at a bebop lick. We'll look at a line that gets us through 2-5-1-6 a little more eloquently in a bebop style, involving some more notes, a little more complexity, a little more density. And then we'll get onto what I'm calling God tier 5 to 1. This is it. This is the ultimate, the high level, operating at an altitude that not many of us get to fly at ever. It's a Brad Mehldau lick, and he's using a note. When he goes from 5 to 1, he's using a note that Berklee College of Music tells you should not work. It theoretically should not work on that 5 chord. We're going to prove them wrong. I think it sounds amazing. I hate to think about it theoretically anyway, but when you do analyze, you're like, wow, that note probably shouldn't work according to all these schools that take $70,000 a year off you to teach you jazz and to teach you theory. We're going to prove them all wrong. We're going to save you a fortune and hopefully expose you to some things you never heard or thought about before when it comes to improvising, when it comes to the bass. Now, there are a couple of ways to approach this first tier, the beginner tier, where we're literally just using one note. We're going to work in the key of C, and we're going to play a 2, a 5, a 1, and our 6 chord, our dominant chord that gets us back to the 2. You don't have to worry about the names of these chords or the qualities. We are using one note only, and it is the tonic. That's what makes this such an effective foot in the door of getting through these chords, because you don't have to know a bunch of stuff and you don't have to think about anything except playing with great time and with great sound. If you can play with great time and great sound, you can get through these chord changes really convincingly. Now, we can comp for ourselves. We could play 2 to the 5, to the 1, to the 6. That's one way to do it if you don't have access to a loop pedal or any kind of playback situation. But luckily, I have some play-alongs for you. We've got those chords, a nice little backing track to play to, so I can make a little bit more of an in-depth example about how we can really get through 1-6-2-5-1 with just a single note. Play-alongs you're going to hear in this video are from my book, Jazz Vocabulary for Electric Bass 2-5-1. There's a ton more material in this book if you want to dig deeper into any of the things we're covering in today's video. I do signed copies. I send them out worldwide here from my studio. You can also get physical copies at Amazon and digital copies at my website. They all come with play-alongs, with standard notation, with bass tab. There are even some things that might interest you in my book, Bass Player's Guide to Altered Chords and Scales, because that's such a huge part of the 5 chord, of the dominant sound, that we'll get to a little later on in the video. All of those things are linked below. Now let's get into the play along and playing 1-6-2-5-1 with just one note. Again, it's just the root. That's an exercise, that's a practice routine in and of itself. You're really disciplining yourself to stay there with just one note. And we've used so far just the tonic, just the root note of the chord. Like I said before, a lot of us, no matter how long we've been playing, no matter how good we think we are, and I've been doing this almost 30 years at this point, and I'm heavily involved in the jazz scene, in the jazz world, I still do this. I still discipline myself to say, hey, do I have enough rhythmic interest, and can I play with a great sound and with great time to make that sound and feel interesting, make it compelling to an audience? So no matter where you are on the experience scale, There's no substitute for disciplining yourself sometimes and making the simplest thing you can possibly play, literally one note in one position in one octave, sound interesting. Now, it doesn't take much to upgrade this sound without having to learn a ton more about music theory and about harmony and all of that stuff. We could upgrade it to just two notes. Let's use the root and the third of the tonic. So we're in the key of C here, and we're going to use C, and we're going to use E, the root and the major third, just in that octave. We'll do it again with the backing track. So not bad, not the most compelling thing. It is a real challenge, even when you've been doing it as long as I have. And there's something really important that should be understood at this point of the process, which is that you cannot play any of this music. I don't think you can play any music actually authentically just from knowing theory and harmony and all the components and, technically which note and which scale goes with which chord. I think 90% or more of the time you spend working on this music should actually be listening. Listen to the innovators and the legends of this music, if it's something that interests you, of course, that have come before us. Listen to your Cannonball Adderleys, your Miles Davises, your Wynton Kellys, your Dexter Gordons. The list of people to listen to is exhaustive. And here in 2024, we have almost instant access to that wherever we are in the world with this supercomputer that we have sitting in our pocket and a simple Spotify subscription. We can go and check out all of that music. I even wrote a book chronicling the history of improvised music, giving examples from decades from the 20s up through the 90s from all of those musicians and many, many more that I just mentioned. It's a little snapshot into how improvisation and how jazz evolved over the last 100 or so years. And most importantly, this comes with listening lists. It comes with playlists and things that I recommend. Hey, this is where I got it from. This was really inspirational to me. Perhaps you might like to check it out. You don't need this book at all. Just go to Spotify, click on Cannonball Adderley, start listening. Take the same song, take Autumn Leaves or All the Things You Are. Take a standard, any jazz standard from the American Songbook that involves a lot of 2-5-1 vocabulary, and listen to it by 10 different trumpet players, 10 different saxophone players. And of course, if you're a bass player and learning walking vocabulary through all of this, listen to Ray Brown and Slam Stewart and all of those greats that came before us. In fact, the very first section of my book, Iconic Lines, is all about the walking bass element of the history of jazz and the fundamentals, what gets your ear tuned in, and all the other stuff can come afterwards. The theory, the chops, the notes, the licks, all that other stuff is an extra layer that comes later, the understanding. First, you have to feel it. And I found the most effective way to do that is to be listening as much as possible. Okay, let's wind it up. Tier 2, this is kind of the intermediate thing. This is where we get a little more into the world of bebop, into really kind of expanding our sound and our vocabulary within these changes. So we're going to use exercise 20 from my 2-5-1 book. And it's kind of right at the limit of the standard 4-string bass tuning, but it is there nonetheless. Let's just play it on its own. 1, 2, 2, 3, and... So now we're really starting to hit some characteristics of the 2, of the 5, specifically some altered sounds on the 5, and get into the 1 and really make that 6 chord pop out. The flat 9 on the 6 chord, the major third, 2 really important notes when transitioning from the 5/7 of 2 to the 2 chord. Very inside, Dorian, for want of a better analysis of it. It's all diatonic to C major on the 2 chord, and then we fall into G altered or A flat melodic minor. We land on a pretty solid inside note, a chord tone on our 2 chord, the 5, the G. Play diatonically there, and then we hit that B flat, which on A7 is really characteristic of a A7 flat 9, and we get the natural third, the major third, C sharp, and the root. So all together. And I think when you can hit so many of these characteristics of the chords and outline deeper elements of the harmony, you're able to hear those changes without a backing track, without any chords being played, which, as you may well have experienced, is actually a thing for us bass players. How many times, if you've ever been on a gig and you play jazz, has the piano player or the guitar player or even the entire band just stopped playing and let you go on your own? Now, not that I agree with that at all. I often encourage the band to comp around me and not be afraid, and I like to play in the higher register of the instrument, but it is a great discipline to be able to outline the deeper elements of harmony and melody within chord changes in all registers of the instrument. Now, to give you a little bit of context, let's play it with the backing track. Now, I wrote these books because these are the kinds of things I use on a regular basis. Something like that is still something to this day, 30 years after having started playing the bass, that I will sit down and play. It's something that's nice and repetitive. It's something I can sink into. It's once I've got the line under my fingers, it's something I don't have to think about at all. And I can really push the boundaries on the time and the sound, which to me are the two most important elements of anything we do with the instrument, of anything we do musically. So what is God tier? It was so hard to pick one lick for this tier because there are, of course, millions. There are hundreds of legendary players who have played on hundreds and possibly thousands of incredible records and made musical statements that I'll be listening to until the end of my life and idolizing and learning and playing along to. It was really tough for this video just to pick one. But one did spring to mind in terms of, let's prove Berklee, and let's prove every music school who has a curriculum that tells you what to play. Let's prove them all wrong with this one Brad Mehldau lick. I put this in God tier. We're going to change keys. We've been in the key of C up until now. We're going to change key to E flat. Brad is basically going to ignore the 2 chord, and we're looking at B flat 7 going to E flat major 7, our root. Our 5 going to 1. Now let's talk very briefly theoretically about some of the notes that make up the 5 chord, or the scale rather, that you would technically be able to play over, be allowed to play over a 5 chord. Of course, they're all diatonic to our root, E flat major, and we're basically playing E flat major from B flat to B flat. Our Mixolydian scale, if you want to give it a name. So a big characteristic of the 5, of the dominant 7th chord, is our flat 7, our minor 7, our A flat in this case. Of B flat 7, we have the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the flat 7. B flat, D natural, F natural, and A flat. Bear that in mind. They really think about this. A flat. I'm going to keep saying A flat. It's A flat, it's the flat 7, it's the minor 7, it's B flat dominant, going to 1. Now, what does Brad do? Second note of the lick. He plays A natural. This is the note that blows music school out of the water. This is what erases curriculum. This is what tells you, man, boy, oh boy, does this sound good. Let's just do it. Let's find ways to create tension and to release it. And he's doing this perfectly. Maybe there's not such a thing as perfection in music, but to me, this moment has stuck with me since I heard it probably 25 years ago. Let's listen to just that lick right here. Yeah. Oh, it just makes me so happy. I mean, we haven't even got into what else is in there that's kind of outside and triadic, which we will in a second. Another God tier component of playing over a 5 chord, going to a 1 chord, using triads, especially this one, a D major triad over a B flat 7 chord. But it's this major 7 on the B flat dominant chord that I really want to highlight. That's super inside. Aside from that 1 A flat, everything else is super inside the harmony. And something that sticks out to me here is the fact that it's not like a jazz cliche. The A natural isn't a passing note, it's a target note. It's a really strong part of the bar. It's on the downbeat. Rather than, you could easily use an A natural as a passing note if you're playing 1, 2, 3. Now I'm thinking too much and I'm trying to force it as a passing note. That's more of a passing note, but this is so strong. And like I said, everything else, super inside. We're going off of the B-flat mixolydian, everything diatonic to E-flat major. So once we get past that A natural, all of that is diatonic until we get to our new friend here, D major, straight up D major triad with a little chromatic approach note. And then we resolve back into E flat. And you'll notice that the D major is happening over the tonic, over the E flat. It's like a delayed resolution. Listen to that again. E flat. But where I said E flat, he was playing D major triad. So it's resolving later than the downbeat of the bar. Let's see if I can play along. Probably going to get super demonetized for playing it so many times, but I want you to hear that. Go check out the album. It's The Art of the Trio, Volume 1, Brad Mehldau. It's from 1997, I believe. It's an amazing album. That song is Blame It on My Youth. It's the opening track of the record, and it's full of little gems like that. Maybe even a lifetime's worth of work in that one album. And I had to pick out half a bar, one bar of music to put in this god tier level of our 3 levels of jazz licks, basically getting through 2 5/1s in 3 very different ways, all the way from using just the root note of the key up into some kind of deeper, denser bebop vocabulary, and all the way here to God tier, where we're using notes that theoretically, technically shouldn't make any sense, but they sound absolutely beautiful. They are what make players like Brad Mehldau, like John Coltrane, like Keith Jarrett, like all of our jazz heroes. Those are the notes, those are the choices, those are the abilities that make them our heroes. And I hope you go check them out. I hope you immerse yourself in it, get lost in the music, and come out the other side completely inspired and with massive amounts of confidence for your own playing.